Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Spinner Reviews, and today is the grand musician slash podcaster special. What am I doing with my life? So as you guys can tell if you've been watching this channel over the course of 2016, I've been devoting a lot less time lately to full formal album reviews, diversifying my content if you want to get all business-like. Especially this summer when I'm working really hard right now on my own debut album, which I'm hoping to have done by the end of the summer and have out at some point later this year. Spending 5 to 10 minutes just describing other people's music hasn't really been as big of a priority, you know? But recently, 3 artists who I know mostly from hosting some of my favorite podcasts have put out new projects over the last month or so I thought it'd be fun to kind of tackle all 3 of those in this kind of long video, just to get a couple names out there, maybe leech off social media following if they share this, I don't know. Skip to this time in the video to get to the Howard Kremer segment, this time to get to the Tom Hummer segment, and let's get this thing started with the first one here, DVG's My Life Became Beautiful. So DVG, or Darren Von Girdner, is a rapper who you may be familiar with in other ways if you're into the world of SourceFed, working there mostly behind the scenes for a few years, and along with SourceFed and People Be Like host William Haynes, he hosts the very entertaining Sheet and Text Back podcast, which I happened to catch live a few months ago, no big deal. And it's actually on Jake and Amir's podcast network, HeadGum, which happened to follow me back on Twitter about a month ago, no big deal. And yeah, I'm harping on that, but man, it just raises so many questions, you know? On the music front, he's been putting out singles and EPs for a few years now, but this new EP seems to be getting his biggest push to date, especially with the fact that he both quit SourceFed and put the Sheet and Text Back podcast on hiatus for the time being to further his rap career. One would hope that the end product would be worth it, and honestly, I'd say it is. See, about a month ago, I talked about another solid EP from a YouTube-based personality with a legit budding music career, Emma Blackery, and how hard it can be to make that transition without relying on a lot of gimmicks or novelty or dumbing down certain genres for that following. But for the most part, she pulled off that transition really smoothly, and I can say very similar things about DVG here. Going back to his previous releases, like last year's Hold Me To It EP, and various singles before and between that EP and this one, the main criticism that was thrown Darren's way, and I kinda agreed with, was that for all the positives about all this stuff, his delivery throughout it could be a little monotone. Now, if you've heard more than a couple episodes of Sheet and Text Back, you know that both he and Will are huge Drake fans, and I suppose just chalk it up to me having, let's call it, mixed feelings about Six God. But it just made some verses to me not bring the same investment that some of the content or the production might call for, you know? And luckily that's a major improvement here on My Life Became Beautiful. For example, he got a song like Quarter Century, a little bit on the cockier side of things, where in this case a clever turn of phrase like "they taking shots in my favor, I'm taking shots for my fader" cover has a little extra layer of charisma added onto it. But on the opposite side of things is 8:34 on a Sunday, which I guess you could call his You and the Six, albeit with the wise choice to stop punctuating every line with mama after the first couplet. In all seriousness, this track is pretty heartbreaking, as we see Darren essentially trying to get through to his mother that abandoned him as a kid. And you can tell that he genuinely wants to make things right with her, but her outright refusal to take any blame or stay out of any drama just makes it really difficult. And again, Darren's delivery really reflects that well, sounding very cold, very disconnected, and even bitingly sarcastic at all points. There's also a couple solid relationship songs here in the form of Night Ends and Sidelines, which also have 2 of the smoothest instrumentals on the EP. And of course, I gotta mention, Darren stepped up to produce most of the beats here for a change, and it really helps him as far as finding his own sound. The 40 comparisons are definitely there and warranted, but if anything, he doesn't fall into that trap of making them so mellow, so washed out, that they become kinda homogeneous and sleep-inducing. If anything, these are far more crisp and engaging than most of the last couple of Drake projects, and I know, Darren, if you're watching this, I'm taking shots at your boy, but hey, my opinions. A few instrumental highlights for me are the nice touches of piano on Sidelines, the tropical synths and layered falsetto on Night Ends, and Quarter Century, which with the combo of moody electronics, backing vocals, and mid-tempo drums almost gives me like a 21 Pilots vibe. And of course my favorite here sonically, the opener I'm Hooked, which with the spliced choral vocals as the melodic backdrop almost feels like a more bouncy, uplifting version of the Ballad of Me and My Brain from the last 1975 2005 album. Speaking of I'm Hooked, however, this does lead to my one real gripe with this EP. See, a lot of the subject matter is about coming up in the rap world, wanting to get successful, prove your haters wrong, all perfectly fine stuff on the surface, but while it does turn out the best out of any case here on I'm Hooked, plenty more than a couple songs like this back to back, especially on a shorter EP like this, without more distinct personal details or stories or concepts, can admittedly get a little redundant after a while, you know? But regardless, My Life Became Beautiful is still a good collection of thoughtful hip-hop tracks that show more potential than ever for DVG going forward, so I gladly recommend this, and I'm gonna give it a 7.5. The second release I'm going to be talking about today is the new EP from Howard Kremer called Oculus Summah. Aside from being a comedian, playing up his unique persona on Earwolf mainstay Who Charted, he's also put out at least an album a year since 2012 on his Bandcamp, whether under his rap name Dragon Boy Suede or what we're talking about here, the Summah albums. See, Howard's a big advocate for enjoying the summer, or Summah as he's coined it, and these collections of songs talk about that in various forms, and between the funny concepts and the eclectic production courtesy of esteemed Who Charted sound guy Brett Starred Morris, it doesn't really get stale like some might think it would on paper. Because let's be honest, writing about one subject for a whole discography can do that. I mean, have you heard a Christian rock band lately? But one way they're getting around that this time around is that now they're totally changing up the format. Not only is this a shorter 5-song EP, but it's also kind of a loose narrative concept EP, a journey about various things getting in the way of fully enjoying the summer. I do have a quick criticism I gotta get out of the way though. Whether intentional or not, these songs definitely have a formula to them. Chorus with an electronic beat, some staccato acoustic guitar or ukulele, maybe some sound effects to fit with the setting of the song, rapped verse where everything but the beat drops out, repeat those a couple times, and the song's over. Not to mention that I realize most of these songs have like the exact same tempo. But that's nitpicking. For each song individually it fits, and it also arguably adds a kind of fluidity to this project that I can appreciate. Getting into it, the opening track, Checkpoint Summah, is basically a quick journey getting through all the non-Summah times of year, with the super clever choice to make the sonic backdrop sound straight off a track from Mario Kart. Then Summah Submersible is a thrilling action sequence of a track where Howard's just chilling in his submarine, as you do, when he encounters all kinds of crazed wildlife attacking him, from a giant squid to Vladimir Putin. We get some pretty great rhymes in the storytelling here, and again, the production really helps add to the mood, with these kind of radar-like sounds put all over the mix that almost act as kind of this gurgling bass and synth foundation. That was just a really cool sonic choice. The next two tracks find Howard kinda struggling with modern technology as it relates to the Summah in this day and age, with Summah Shut In basically finding him breaking into people's houses, fighting them and forcing them outside away from their technology. It's a little weird Howard would have this kind of attitude given he is an out trans-millennial, but whatever, you gotta suspend your disbelief for this kind of stuff. And the song Drones posed an interesting question. What if remote-controlled drones became so popular at the beach that they just blocked out the sun? Howard responds to this with a full-on airstrike. A little disproportionate of a strategy maybe, but it's the catchiest chorus here, and it's more thematically compelling than anything off the last Muse album, so I can let slide. And we ended off with The Valley of the Shadow of Sept, which, yes, loosely parodies the first verse of Gangsta's Paradise. The last tracks on these albums I've found are the best produced, and this is no exception. The drums get a lot fuller and leads into a legitimately gorgeous swell of horns and ukuleles. It's a bittersweet but pretty awesome way to send off another good Summah, complete with the famous non-Summah prayer that fellow chartists might be familiar with. In all seriousness, guys, I can definitely see why someone wouldn't be a big fan of this. Maybe it's Howard's odd inflections that I guess you get used to after hearing them regularly on a podcast for 2 years, but it's another solid installment in this whole series that I'm glad to give at least a 7. And the last record I'm talking about today, the only full-length album of the three, is the new one from Tom Hummer called Dystopian Blues. Tom, as you may or may not know, is one half of the channel Velocities in Music, which started out in video reviews like these before relaunching as a podcast about a year ago. In one episode of that podcast a few months ago, Jake, the other host of the show, did an on-the-spot interview with Tom about his music, which he's been doing on the side since about 2010 or so. What's interesting about Dystopian Blues right off the bat is how bizarrely different it is from the singer-songwriter and alt and indie rock that came before it on his previous three albums. This is far more abstract, more experimental, as it brings in elements of post-rock, modern prog rock, and an overall mood that feels like the score to some dark sci-fi movie. In that respect, I don't have as much strong insight to give this record, since it's going into genres I'm not quite as used to unpacking, but it's definitely worth talking about either way. It's 5 long pieces, adding up to 39 minutes, and it's mostly instrumental, with only 2 tracks having any real vocal contributions from Tom, and only 1 Blue having any actual lyrics, which even then are pretty washed out in the mix in a move that I'm pretty sure was intentional. But that's okay, because most of the ear-grabbing moments here come in the central recurring melodies, from pianos, guitars, even some electronic stuff thrown in, whether it's a calmer atmospheric space, or in the midst of a crushing crescendo that a few of these tracks peak at. It's all very well orchestrated, and the fact that it was all done himself really has to be commended. The only thing maybe holding it back for me personally is that no matter what, the replay value on these kinds of albums are up in the air when it comes to my personal library, but that's purely a stylistic thing, and for the style that Dystopian Blues goes for, I think it hits a lot of the right marks, so I'm gonna give it an 8. And that's going to wrap up my musician/podcaster special. Who knows, maybe I can get one of these people on my own podcast, Mad Sound, sometime. I wouldn't complain about that. I'll also link DVG's YouTube channel and Howard and Tom's Bandcamps in the description if you want to check out anything I talked about here. And if you guys have heard any of these albums, I'm curious what you think about them. Let me know in the comments down below. Share this around with anyone who might be interested. Follow me on Twitter for updates, and hopefully I'll see you in the next episode of Spin It Reviews. Bye.